Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we like to light a spark or shed a little light on a Jewish text or tradition. Today, in celebration of Mother's Day, we want to explore matrilineal descent in Judaism. How and when did it come to pass in such a patrilineal society and legal system that mothers determine who's Jewish? So sit back and buckle up as we ask, why do Jewish women rule? So this is one of those topics that I assigned myself before I did the research. And as I got into the research, I really learned a lot, so thank you for that. So if I was to ask everyone here, what makes a Jew in terms of birth? What do you need? What's the one ingredient that you need?
You need a Jewish mom.
Jewish mother. So if you're a Jewish man and a Jewish woman, and I say, oh, you got a Jewish mother, you're Jewish, right?
Yes.
Husband really doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's kind of like matrilineal descent, right? It goes from the mother. Okay?
It is matrilineal.
Okay. And if I was to say what the reason is for that and how old that concept is and how primary it is to Judaism, what would you say? Let's start with why. Let's start with the rationale.
Obviously, you always know who the mother is.
Okay, so evidentiary. Any other reason? So if I was to ask you if there were anything else in the Bible that's matrilineal, in other words, does the Bible support that kind of thing? You know, Margaret Mead went to islands in the Pacific and she found societies that were matrilineal. Is there any of that in Judaism? I mean, when you look at all the genealogies, when you look at the genealogies, for instance, in Genesis and Exodus, somebody Ben. It's from the father, right?
Correct, but I was going to say that only the children of Sarah, the legitimate wife of Abraham, could be the nation, and the same thing with Isaac, and the same thing with Isaac. Anyway.
So there seems to be, at least in terms of the favored wife, the choice of the favored wife is pretty key. And if you had to characterize all of Genesis, it's the story of the favored son and the favored wife, in that order, where there's multiple wives, but basically it's choosing the second-born over the firstborn. That's universal. And then picking your favorite wife. So it's a question of choice, but certainly their matrilineality has an effect. So what really blew me away when I looked into this, and there's been a lot of research into this, most of the scholars say it's clear that in Judaism was totally patrilineal until a certain moment when this idea appeared, and all of the scholars just are shaking their heads, scratching their eyebrows, trying to figure out how did we get this matrilineality. So let's start with the breaking news, which is this week in Japan, we found a new emperor was named, and according to the New York Times report, the Queen was not even allowed to be in the room. And Japan is a wonderful example of a strictly patrilineal society. So if you look, it says at the last paragraph of 1, the prohibitions go much further. Women are not allowed to reign. In fact, a woman born into the royal family must officially leave it once they marry, and none of their children can be in line to the throne. So in a very strictly patrilineal society, it's almost exclusive. Okay, it follows the father's genealogy to the exclusion of the in-laws. You leave your parents' house and you join your father's house. So let's see now, going back at the text, and these are the texts.
Father looking at the British secrets to it? Because it's unfathomable to me how they figure out their descent of leadership.
Well, I mean, all the articles in the Times were saying that this has to change because the current couple only has a daughter, and all of the nieces, there's no male heir to follow. So something's going to have to change here, which again gives us an insight into that moment in the history of one of these very strict descent lineage types of traditions that it has to break or has to change. And that's why I brought it up. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, did that happen? There were no sons to take over, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe's.
Okay, well that's possible. Let's. So the scholarship, and there's one guy named Shia Cohen who's at Harvard, and he wrote a book about being Jewish, and he has maybe 40 pages just on matrilineal descent. So he's quoted by pretty much everyone. And there's some other scholars that he quote. I posted on Facebook yesterday at 4:30 that I was giving this class. At 4:40, I got an email. So I got an email from Ethan Tucker at Hadar saying, "Did you read my 3 articles on matrilineal descent?" So this is a very, very. There's a lot of okay, but in any case, So the first people that are looking for proof one way or the other, the first thing they do is they look at Deuteronomy. And it's basically the prohibition against intermarriage. And it says, you shall not intermarry with them. Who is them?
The
heir,
Edomite?
the outsider.
Okay, typically it means the 7 nations in Israel. Shivat Amamim, okay? So it's not a blanket thing about not marrying a non-Jew. It's the 7 nations in. And we'll see a reason why that's so. You shall not marry with them. Do not give them your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, no period. And this is why when I lane and everybody's clapping me about a period, I sometimes reject it. Because look how the rabbis learned this. Or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from me to worship other gods. So from here, the rabbis learn and try to learn that the emphasis is on your sons should not marry their daughters, because if they marry their daughters, the children will not be Jewish. Okay? From that we might learn that the daughters marry a non-Jew, their kids are Jewish. They try to learn that. It's clearly not there. It's a push. But even so, notice that the idea is that typically the father decides what comes after. So if the father marries a non-Jewish girl from Babylonia and brings her home, that's not going to be a problem. The father-in-law is not going to have much influence over. The concern was when you marry your neighbor in Israel. Okay? So there the father-in-law lives in the next town over. The possibility of influence will be there. So most of the scholarship on this type of thing focuses on that and says it's not clear as to whether there's a difference here or not. So the next one is in Tanakh, and this is in Ezra. So the Jewish people are, and this is number 3, the Jewish people are in exile in Babylonia for 70 years, and they're coming back to the land of Israel. And Ezra says, let's make a covenant and expel all the women, the non-Jewish women who these Jews have married, and those who have been born to them and their children, in accordance with the bidding of the Lord, and all who are concerned over the commandments of our God. So the idea here was, number one, it focuses only on the men who have married non-Jewish women. And what it says is, get rid of your wives and your children, because they're not Jewish. Okay? So from there, they would also like to learn. From here, we can see that if the wives, the daughters who married a Babylonian guy, they're okay. And the argument is it's clear, and this gets back to the Japanese. When in those ages, people weren't living together in mixed communities. When the Tevye thing, when you made that choice, you left. So the daughters who had married into the Babylonian community were lost already. It's the men in a patrilineal society who had taken daughters from the local population who still had the daughters around, and from Ezra we learn, kick them out. So there's really nothing to be learned here, except, again, that, number one, the biblical tradition was not overjoyed about intermarriage, okay? And you can learn from all of these, the one conclusion that you can easily make is that it would prefer both parents to be Jewish. But we don't know anything about a matrilineal line yet. There's certainly nothing positive said about it. It would be very easy for any of these verses to say, don't worry about the children of the mother, she's Jewish. It doesn't say that anywhere in all the Torah and Tanakh tradition. So now we get to 4. And this is the main proof text that is given for this change, where all of a sudden having a Jewish mother makes a difference. So I'm going to read just the highlighted parts of this Mishnah, because the highlighted parts gives the rules. And what I put in lowercase is the examples. So it starts by saying, and this is from the Mishnah in Kedushin, wherever there is a valid betrothal and no sin, the child follows the male with regard to familial status. So when we started this discussion out, I said, what makes a Jew a Jew? And everybody said, need a Jewish mother. The answer is, if there's a couple and the man is Jewish and the wife is Jewish, the kid's Jewish because he has a Jewish father. It follows the male. He's a Cohen, he's a Levi, he's a Yisrael because of the father. Everything comes down to the father. It's his favorite wife, her name is Sarah, fine. But when you list the genealogy, when it gets called up for the Torah, this is a patrilineal society. That's the starting point. Next rule. Whenever there is a valid betrothal and there is sin, the child follows the defective one. Okay? So, a widow and a divorcee is not allowed to marry a Cohen. If they marry a Cohen, clearly, even though the father is a Cohen and by the first rule should be a Cohen in a patrilineal society, now already follows the mother, not only follows the mother in terms of just being a Yisrael possibly, but is also a halal, which is someone who comes out of that type of a marriage. Next rule. With any woman for whom there is no betrothal to him, but there is betrothal to others, the child is a mamzer. Mamzer is a bastard. We'll get into the intricacies of that in a second. So, this would be a case where there is no betrothal to him. So what is this? When one has sexual intercourse with anyone mentioned in the Torah. So you're not allowed to have relations with a married woman. You're not allowed to have relations, incestual relationships. In all of those cases, could be two very good Jews in good standing. The child is a mamzer. Now the last one. Any woman for who there is no betrothal, either to him or to others, the child is like her. What is this? This is the child of a non-Jewish maidservant or non-Jewish woman. So the interesting thing is, notice we all started by saying, Jewish mother, kid is Jewish. If you read this, it says, if there's v'kol mi she'ein lo Allah v'lo acherim kedushin havlad k'motah. Anytime that the marriage cannot be tofes, that it doesn't stick, so there's no marriage, it follows her. In other words, you could easily say we're talking about a single mom. We're talking about a situation where there was a rape, the father's not around anymore. Even if he is around, of course we know that if he's around and he's took her to his home, this is nothing really to talk about. But the point is, if it's a single woman, the kid follows her. Okay? So it's hardly a resounding vote that Jewish, the greatness of Judaism goes always after the mother. It's like almost a last step. Now there is one scholar who makes a very strong argument that this came out of Roman law. Yeah.
It seems to me that the notion of whether or not you're a Jew comes from the mother. But what's happening with the father is your status within the Jewish world is coming through the father. And there's a real distinction between those two concepts. In other words, whether you're a Jew or not, it's happening through the mother primarily.
Okay.
But whether you're a Kohen, your status.
Okay, so your tribe or your caste, whatever you want to call it, comes from the father.
That's a real difference between those.
But where do you see that from here?
Well, because if you go to the first, you said initially, based on the first comment in number 4, that the child follows the male.
Right.
More about Kohenet, or whether you're a Kohen, a Levi, or Yisrael, comes through the father, not through the mother.
That's
generally. So that's status. That's your status, basically, and also your tribe.
Okay, so
and your Yerusha, your inheritance, comes through the father.
So the one argument that I would make against that, and we'll get to this text later, hopefully if Phil doesn't interrupt us, is the concept of a bat Levi. Okay. So that's
or a bat Kohen.
Well, yes, definitely. So the law is that when you when you have a firstborn child, Peter Rechem, that you have to redeem it from a Kohen. Except if you are a Kohen, or if your wife is the daughter of a Kohen or a Levi, is a bat Levi. So clearly the tribe also goes through the mother as well. You could say she's a carrier, okay, if you want to use that.
That's very proscribed. That's a very singular instance.
Yeah.
That's not a general rule.
Right, but I don't think you have enough here to build your general rule either. Okay. You can say maybe. But one thing that you can say from this Mishnah, and it is a Mishnah which is powerful, is that it's a de facto kind of status. This is not in a situation where, if you look at the beginning of the Mishnah, it says where there's a good marriage and there's no sin, child follows the father. Done deal.
With regard to familial status. The words that you just...
Yeah. Havlad holech achal hazachar goes after the father, and then it gives some examples. Again, examples that are practical because its assumption is there are two Jews that are married. What's up for play? Tribal membership, things like that. Okay, but if this is the source of matrilineal descent, it's pretty tenuous. Okay. So there are a bunch of different things. A lot of them are very tenuous. Let's just see one more, and this is in the Talmud in Yevamot. And it says, Rabbi Achabar Habira and Rabbi Tanchum Bestin Chaya from Akko redeemed captive women, one of whom had been impregnated by a Gentile. They came to Rav Ami, who said to them, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Hanina, all say, when a Gentile or a slave has intercourse with a Jewish woman, the child is a mamzer. Okay, so here we don't have what we were expecting, which is to say that the child is Jewish, is a mamzer. Said Rabbi Yosef, is it a great trick to mention many names? So if you notice what they said is Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Hanina, all say the kid is a mamzer. So right. So Rabbi Yosef says, so you have any more names? I'm not impressed. Rav and Shmuel in Bavel and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Bar Kapor in Eretz Yisrael all say that when a Gentile or a slave has intercourse with a Jewish woman, the child is kasher. Okay? So notice here, you could easily make a case that they all agree the child is Jewish. Whether Jewish mamzer or a Jewish kosher. Okay? It's kind of interesting. Then it says, when a Gentile or a slave has intercourse with a Jewish woman, the child is a mamzer. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, the child is makul kal. So now we have a new category. Messed up. In slang, it's not a nice thing to say to somebody in modern day Hebrew. It's messed up. He's messed up. Abai said to him, why do you rely on Rav Dimi to establish Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's position was that the child is a mamzer? Rely on Rabin. Here we go. We got Rabin. For when Rabin came, he said Rav Natan and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi ruled permissively, meaning that the child is kasher and is a good Jew. Okay? So what do we learn from this paragraph?
There's no clear answer.
Okay, so one, we learn that this was something that was under discussion. Do we have a better insight what caused the discussion? You were talking about before, Sally, about maybe there were no guys around.
Oh, right.
What caused this discussion?
Because we redeemed the captive woman.
Redeem a captive woman.
Right.
So now we're talking and I don't understand why all of the scholars Like Shai Cohen at the end says, and asked me why this happened, I have no idea. I don't know. To me, it seems pretty clear that there was a situation where nice Jewish girls were being captured. Romans, I guess they did take some boys too, but there were no children from that. But when they took the women, they took them for one purpose, and they came back, and the rabbis went out of their way to change the law to accept them. Or at least the rabbis that we ended up following. Okay? So they reached back into the tradition, and they said, don't listen to the guy who says it's a mamzer, don't listen to the one who says it's mukulkal, we're changing the law. And they did a pretty good job because of how we started today. Because knee-jerk, today, people will say, what makes somebody Jewish? A Jewish mother. Okay? But there was a period of transition. It wasn't clear at all in the Bible. If anything, you would make the case that the Bible was totally patrilineal. Wasn't in Tanakh, in Ezra, same thing applies. It happens during this Talmudic period that we start to see change. And again, no one says it's because of this, but we do have a little evidence that these were tenuous times, and that the rabbis, in their wisdom, the best of the rabbis, came and stepped up and made it so that these women's children were Jewish.
But it's not only the children, it's the women themselves. They were accepted back in. They were now being accepted back into the community. Where before, I think, by accepting the children.
Well, but again, I was looking for a book this morning. We have a friend who photographed the children of the Rwandan genocide of raped mothers. Mm-hmm. So every one of these is a mixed marriage.
Right.
And every one of these was rejected by the community, as were their mothers. So I think your point is absolutely correct. That if your child is not accepted, that besmirches you too. And so this was a major thing about, she's good, she can marry my son. That says it all. Yeah.
The other thing is, in all the wars that have occurred, the winning team, you might say, the winner has always raped the captured women. It's like, this is what goes on.
Yeah.
It's like desecrating a temple.
Absolutely.
It's like taking the high ground. It's a way of being able to beat them. And a law like this says you didn't win. We're bigger than that. Go ahead.
So a couple of things, because I've never known what to make of it. Moses married someone who was not Jewish, correct? Zipporah, the daughter of a Midianite. As far as I'm aware, in the Torah text, he's never criticized. Even when Aaron, ironically in a way, even when Aaron and Miriam criticized him back in Numbers about...
They're punished.
They're criticizing him because he had separated himself from his wife as one of the issues they had with him privately, instead of saying, what did you do? As far as I know, not a word of criticism. I think, but I'm less sure of this, that Joseph, another major hero and one of the forerunners of the Messiah, also intermarried when he lived in Egypt. I'm not sure.
I think it's pretty easy to say that intermarriage, first of all, it's like, did Adam and Eve's kids do incest? Well, I don't know who else they married, okay? When the Jews were young, when Abraham was young, there wasn't exactly a big pool of Jews around. So before the argument that is made not to answer your question, to use your question as proof, was that it was a totally patrilineal society. And if I have to bring a big biblical example, that is the reverse, it's Dinah. So what happens to Dinah? She gets raped. And it's clear, if you leave things alone, if Shimon and Levi didn't do what they did, she would have been them, not us. We made them, and the question is, did it really happen? Or when the Torah was written at that point, was that projecting into what should be done with these 7 nations again? It was always about the locals, and if we intermarry with them, we're going to be lost. The women would be lost.
So, and one last thing to something Martha said. Somewhere in, I don't know, I think it's, in Muhammad, there's a passage that says if you go out to war and you're attracted to one of the local women as part of the whole war effort, you are required to take her back and treat her with the same degree of courtesy and this, that, and the other as you would someone who is indigenous to your own people, and you can't have your way with them. Now that's several centuries, whatever period of time later, but it came to be a time where there was a recognition that this could occur, but it had to occur under a certain set of rules, with the woman being treated respectfully and being integrated into...
All right, absolutely. Let's move on. So let's go to 7. And this is an amazing thing, because this we all know about. In the 80s, the Reform movement did something radical. They accepted patrilineal descent, or what they really accepted was unilineal descent. And if you have one, and we all, let me speak for myself. I all assume they got together in a room, they go, how many eyes do I have? How many nays do I have? They issued a responsa in the rich tradition of classical rabbinic Judaism. And I quote now in 6. The concept of paternity as determining factor in progeny being considered as having both Jewish descent is a constant in the Hebrew Bible, as the authors of the report elaborated. So they go through exactly the discussion that we're having. They prove that patrilineal descent is actually the primary form of descent. And it quotes the Talmud in Kedushin, it quotes the Mishnah, and at the end it says, because it has to give a reason how this matrilineal thing came so dominant, they give a reason. They say the woman with a child had no recourse but to return to her own people. So they had to explain how matrilineal started, and they said that if a woman was rejected, she came back and had to be accepted. Again, kind of similar to what we were discussing before, which is, number one, the assumption is that if a woman intermarried and didn't come back, she was absorbed into the other. And if she did come back, she had no recourse, she had to be accepted. But it amazed to me, and this is a long tshuva, if you will, how they really went into this whole discussion. And there were people on file. I have Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, who was my rabbi on the Upper West Side, who said this is going to destroy Judaism. This is the end of Am Yisrael being like one. This is terrible. American Jewry is doomed. Now Rabbi Riskin moves to Israel. Okay? What happens in Israel? A very famous case. We're at 7 now. Lev Pashkov, an Israeli soldier who is one of the million Russian Jews who came in the great Aliyah from Russia, whose father was Jewish and whose mother was not. And by the way, the law of return is if you have one Jewish grandparent, you are Jewish. Okay?
That's not a halachic answer. That's a legislative answer.
That's a legislative answer, which I heard they got from Hitler. Hitler killed a Jew based on one Jewish grandparent. The state of Israel accepts a Jew based on one Jewish grandparent. This guy is fighting in the war of Lebanon. He dies. He gets buried in a the Rabbinut will not permit him into the military cemetery for Jews. Okay, so there are different. Some people say he was buried in the Jewish and he was moved, and some people say that he was in the non-Jewish. The whole state of Israel, everybody in it was up in arms. This guy died for us. He spoke Hebrew. He considered himself part of our people. How could you let this happen? So this raised the whole issue in Israel, nothing to do with conservative reform and the assimilated Jews in America. So now there are rabbis like Rabbi Riskin who are saying we should make it very easy on someone who has a Jewish father to convert. Because, and now they're sounding a lot like the Reform, if you ask me, we have this rich tradition for patrilineal descent. You shouldn't consider him just like another guy who walks off the street. This is, after all, someone who has 100 generations of Jews standing behind him. You can't just reject that. So Rabbi Riskin and others bring the following tshuva from the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel in the 40s and 50s. His name was Rabbi Ben Zion Meir Hai Uziel. And he in 8 says, from here we learn that a patrilineal Jew brought by his father for a conversion should be accepted by the Bet Din. Even though this child is called the child of the Gentile woman, he is considered Zera Yisrael. Oh, so now we have a new tag to put on somebody. He's not a goy, he's a Zera Yisrael. everyone agrees that children of a Jewish man born to a Gentile woman are called Zera Yisrael. Therefore, when the father brings him to convert, the child reverts to his original lineage. And what does the rabbi go on to say? And therefore, when he gets called up for an aliyah, he's not Ben Avraham, the Sarah. He's Ben Shmuel Gantz, the guy who gave birth to him. Okay? And if the father was a Cohen, he becomes a Cohen. He's returning to his roots. So, all of a sudden now, we see that matrilineal descent is not exactly the way we thought it was in terms of being written in stone. And we see that there are gradations. We've already thrown around terms like he's a bastard, but he's Jewish, he's Makulkal, he's kasher. First of all, I think the one conclusion that we can all come to is it's not clear. And there are many different opinions, and that the social element has a big something to do with it. So this is where it becomes kind of interesting. If you go to 9, this Rabbi Louis Jacobs starts to bring feminism into it. And he goes, the big uproar in America was we have to accept patrilineal descent. He says, isn't it funny that in America, where feminism is so strong, that all of a sudden they're belittling matrilineal descent? Here the women, I said, come to this lecture, I have a woman going like this. I thought all the women would want to come. This is women power thing. It's the one part of Judaism where the women have all the keys to the castle. And he says, isn't it ironic that these progressive Jews are trying to belittle matrilineal descent and put it on the same level as patrilineal descent. So that's just an ironic comment. The interesting comment is from in 10, Judith Kaufman, who is a wonderful scholar at the seminary, and she argues that how can you take away matrilineal descent and replace it with or complement it with patrilineal descent? It needs to stay there, and you need to punish Jewish men for marrying out. Okay? Kind of like stuff you find in the African American community, where all of the guys are looking to kind of move up, move out, and whatever the point is, she makes it into something sexist. The obvious question is, why don't you punish Jewish women who marry out? So it's a very strange way for her to go. Unfortunately, I didn't find the original. I only found where she was quoted. So I'd like to conclude where we kind of were starting, which is I was surprised because I suggest the best, if you're really interested in this, I would go to Hadar and listen to the 3 lectures by Ethan Tucker. Where he comes out basically is, he said, I learned a lot from one of my students. One of my students is the daughter of a Jewish mother and a non-Jewish father. And this daughter came to me and said, when people just say, oh, of course you're Jewish, because you have a Jewish mother, number one, she felt it dissed her father, like he wasn't part of it. And number 2, it dissed the decision that she made to become Jewish, to be Jewish, to take that move. It's like it's so knee-jerk that we say, you have a Jewish mother. So his suggestion is that whether having a Jewish mother is like being 4.9% Jewish, or 5.1% Jewish is what he says, and having a Jewish father is 4.9, either one of those children, literally for their own identity's sake, has to make a decision. And following the chief rabbi's advice, they should go through some sort of return ceremony. It's not quite a ceremony of gerut, but he sees all of this mix and all of this confusion as leading to some sort of compromise solution where no matter who your parents are, if you come from one of these mixed marriages, you're making a conscious decision, and we should respect that decision, and we should respect you making that decision, especially in the terms of the child. But what I want to do is, I was struck by how no one really focused on the roots of matrilineal strength within Judaism. And that's what you were kind of arguing, Henry, and you were saying also, Sally. So I just went quickly, What's the first thing it says in the Torah? After Adam and Eve were created, it says, therefore man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife. That almost sounds exactly opposite to everything that we were just talking about. That there was a strong sense within Judaism of joining the wife. And I put that into this strong tradition of breaking with the entitlement. In other words, there was a fight against the firstborn, not only the firstborn of Egypt, but the firstborn here. You have to choose the son. There was a strength of choosing the wife. Choosing in terms of this whole creation of how Eve was made from the rib. So to me, this sense of covenant is where the woman, to me, waxes very strong. And that comes out in terms of the choice. There's the DNA, there's the lineage, and I totally see that, whether it comes to being a Cohen or even becoming a Jew. But then there's also this chosenness. That is something that has to be chosen. And that, you see, of all your relatives, the only relative you choose is your wife, or your spouse, I should say. Because now I do agree it's on an equal playing field. And then if you go to Genesis 17:21, where you have literally God talking to Abraham about the choice of Sarah over Hagar. So here, if you're strictly patrilineal, both children should be part of the stream. But clearly, as you pointed out, Sally, there was this choice that it says, but my covenant I will maintain with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year. So I think there is a tradition within Judaism that can't be ignored. You know, who knows 3? Well, who knows 4? There's always been, and it's not a feminist or something new. There is definitely within our tradition something that is nuanced in terms of the matrilineal line.
And we say Asher Borcha Monu Mikol Ha'amim, other people.
Right.
No, it's very, very either way.
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a fascinating subject, and I really would listen to the Ethan Tucker stuff, because he goes through the whole tradition, and I learned a lot just preparing.
I was at those lectures.
Yes.
I was at those lectures, and I have to say, they were so dense. I have all the materials.
Mine is finished.
It was so dense that I'm almost hearing for the first time exactly what you were saying.
Well, because I do a good job of dumbing it down. It comes naturally.
That works for me.
Thank you. What? So in honor of Mother's Day and the belief that maybe matrilineal descent is more of the answer than we know, we're going to end with a song. It's called Prayer of the Mothers, and it was born as a result of an alliance between singer-songwriter Yael Deckelbaum and a group of courageous women leading the movement of Women Wage Peace. Thousands of women marched from the north of Israel to Jerusalem in a call for peace. And this is the song by Yael Deckelbaum. I've put a link to the beautiful YouTube video in the notes to the podcast. Enjoy.
بين الأرض والسماء congratulate the women of Women Wish Peace. I want to thank you for standing up for peace alongside your Palestinian sisters. I want to thank you and to let you know that in the world that we live in, peace is possible only when women of integrity and faith stand up for the future of their children. Congratulations. It is my hope that you will continue to battle for peace in a constructive way, and I look forward to the day that I will come and join you. Thank you for the children of Israel. Thank you for the children of Palestine. Thank you. Peace. Shalom.